The bougainvillea had grown thick across the front gate, spilling pink petals over the path, like confetti no one asked for. I was pruning the branches slowly, careful not to clip the new buds, when my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. I wiped my hands on my shirt, expecting it to be a neighbor or maybe a political robocall. But it was her. Amelia. For a second, I just stared at her name. A full name now, Amelia Whitmore Morrison, since she changed it on every profile and signature line. I hadn't heard her voice in weeks. She didn't even return my message on her birthday. Still, I pressed the call button and brought it to my ear. "Mom," she said flat. Not cold, but nothing close to warm. I tried to inject ease into my voice. "Sweetheart, I was just wondering when the big day is. I need to put in for some time if I'm going to travel." There was a pause. That kind of pause that tells you the air is about to change. "Oh," she said, "we already got married yesterday. Just a small ceremony. Only people who really matter." The words didn't hit all at once. They unfurled slowly, like smoke from something still burning. "You what?" "We just wanted something simple. Intimate," she said. "Less pressure." I sat on the porch steps. The shears were still in my other hand. My fingers had gone numb around the handles. But I stopped myself. I could hear it already. The defense, the rationale, the practiced detachment. She wasn't calling to explain. She was calling to tell me what was already done. "Well," I said, voice steady as I could manage. "Congratulations." "Thanks," she said, almost cheerful now. "Daniel thought it would be better this way. His parents arranged most of it. His mom had a friend with a garden in Pasadena." I swallowed the rising heat in my chest. "We do need one thing from you, though," she added. "Of course. Can you send us the keys to the beach house? Daniel's always wanted to see La Jolla in the fall. He says it would be perfect for our honeymoon." There it was. Not a photo. Not a dress. Not a memory shared. Just a request for the one thing I still held our family's only inheritance. A home bought with the last of Richard's life insurance. The house where Amelia had learned to swim. The same porch where she once declared barefoot and sunburnt at 12 that she'd get married on that beach someday. I didn't respond right away. "Mom," she said, "is that okay?" I pressed my fingers into the wood beneath me, grounding myself. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "I'll make sure you get the keys." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. "Great. Thank you. Really." Then she hung up. No mention of a cake. No offer to send photos. No invitation to visit. Just silence. I sat there a long while staring at the ocean past the rooftops. The wind had picked up blowing petals across the yard. The shears slipped from my hand. So this was it. Not forgotten, just replaced. And as the breeze carried that same salt I'd breathed for 30 years, another thought took hold. If they thought this was the beginning of their new life, they'd mistaken me for someone who'd step aside quietly. Because Daniel Morrison had no idea what I still remembered. And what I'd been willing to forgive until now. The key to the La Jolla house sat on a small ceramic dish beside my sink. Same place it always had. For 20 years it had traveled with me first, from the hospital to the bank, then from the courthouse to home, outliving leases, friendships, even my husband. And now she wanted it mailed like a party favor. I didn't move that morning. I sat by the kitchen window watching gulls circle over the distant surf coffee going cold in my hand. That house wasn't just where we spent summers. It was where I learned to breathe again after Richard died. Where I took off my wedding ring and stopped apologizing for crying in public. Where Amelia had sat on the deck legs too short to reach the rail, asking me if her dad could still see her from the sky. I had said yes. I wasn't sure then. I'm not sure now. After Richard's accident, I had 3 things left: a toddler, a box of medical bills, and a small life insurance check that didn't even cover the mortgage. Selling the old place wasn't a choice. It was survival. The beach house came later, when I started picking up double shifts at Scripps, taking night duty so Amelia wouldn't notice how tight things were. I bought that house outright after 6 years. No mortgage, no shared name on the deed, just mine. We called it the Blue House back then. It was barely bigger than a cottage, all salt-stained siding and crooked windows, but it had a view that stretched past grief, and that was enough. She learned to swim there. We built sand castles and burned hot dogs and got sunburned to the point of peeling. The little patch of grass out front was where I taught her to ride a bike. She lost her first tooth on that deck. She made me tea parties out of sand and driftwood. And now she wanted it for a honeymoon she never told me about. A life she had built without me. I walked into the bedroom and opened the small file box in my closet. Inside, everything was still in order. Old tax records, property documents, medical certifications I no longer needed. The deed was still crisp. My name on every line. Delia Marie Whitmore. No one else. I ran my finger over the embossed seal, remembering how proud I'd been signing it. They didn't want the house. They wanted the erasure. Not just of my ownership, but of the memory of how it got there. Of the nights I came home with swollen ankles and shaking hands, still in scrubs, still smiling because Amelia didn't need to see tired. Of the sacrifices I made without asking for applause. I stood for a while holding the paper before sliding it back into the box. Later that evening, I opened the safe under my floorboards and pulled out the second copy. Then I opened a fresh envelope. If they were going to start their life there, they'd start it with a reminder. Because I was done being edited out of the narrative. And if Daniel wanted something for free, he could start by reading the cost. The first time Daniel stepped into my home, he brought roses. Not a grocery store bundle wrapped in crinkled plastic, but long-stemmed deep red with a satin ribbon, and no scent. The kind of bouquet you send after closing a deal. Amelia had asked me to make dinner that night, something homey. I roasted chicken with lemon, and garlic sautéed vegetables, opened a bottle of red. I even lit the good candles, the ones I saved for holidays, and set the table with the blue-rimmed china from my mother. I was trying. I was always trying. Daniel wore a navy sport coat and a smile like he knew how light hit him. Every move was deliberate. He shook my hand with both of his, complimented the house, admired the kitchen, told me how rare it was to meet a woman with such presence. I remember thinking, presence is not something you notice unless you're looking for power. He asked questions. Too many of them. About my nursing career, about the view from the back patio, about how long I'd lived in the neighborhood, and then about the beach house. So Amelia tells me you've had the La Jolla place for years, he said, twirling a fork through his salad casual. Since she was 7, I answered, buttering a roll. Must be a stunning investment. I mean, oceanfront like that, probably doubled in value by now. I nodded politely, but didn't return the serve. He tried again. Do you rent it out in the off-season? Or is it just family? It's not for rent, I said. Never has been. He smiled, holding my eyes for just a second too long. Then lifted his glass. Understandable. Family memories are priceless. It was so cleanly delivered I almost missed the calculation behind it. After dinner, he offered to clear the table, rolled up his sleeves, washed dishes like he'd been raised on etiquette books. But I've spent too long watching people say what they think you want to hear. His gratitude was precise and rehearsed. When they left that night, I stood at the kitchen sink watching the taillights disappear down the street. Amelia had leaned into him as they walked to the car, her head on his shoulder like a teenager. She looked content, but I didn't feel it. I cleaned up slowly, resetting each plate, each glass, returning everything to its place. When I opened the drawer for the dish towels, I paused. The property tax statement for the La Jolla house was sitting on the counter. I'd been reviewing it earlier and must have forgotten to tuck it away. and it was turned. Not where I'd left it, not facing the window, but turned toward the table, as if someone had picked it up, read it, set it down, the number in bold market value. 6 figures, starting with a 9. I stood there a while staring at it, not moving, not touching it. The next morning, I took that statement and locked it in the fireproof safe with the deed. And from that point forward, I never left papers in the open when Daniel came around. Amelia started calling less after that dinner. When I did hear from her, Daniel's name floated into every conversation. He liked her hair better curled. He thought they should move somewhere with investment potential. He wanted them to have their own traditions. Traditions. The word sat wrong in my mouth. It implied the ones she grew up with weren't good enough. Every time she mentioned him, her tone shifted, like she was performing 2 repeating lines she hadn't written. He says, he thinks, he prefers. That's how it started. But the thing that stayed with me was how she said he prefers. I don't spend so much time on the phone with you during the week. Not because it was cruel. It wasn't. It was soft, but deliberate. I understand, I said. If you're happy, I'm happy. She couldn't see the lie in my voice. I started listening more carefully after that, to the pauses, to the places she'd once laughed but now went silent. When she came over, Daniel usually came too, and when he couldn't make it, she didn't come at all. One Sunday, they stopped by the La Jolla house unannounced. I'd been repainting the back deck and nearly dropped the brush when I saw their car in the driveway. Daniel stepped out, holding a paper bag of wine and pastries, calling it a surprise drop-in. Amelia smiled, but there was something behind it, tension pulled tight. We sat on the patio. I poured coffee, though they didn't ask for it. Daniel strolled through the kitchen, complimenting the cabinets, commented on how the original finish gives it charm. He knew exactly how to make the house sound like a listing. He admired the hardwood, then ran his hand along the window casing, like he was already picturing furniture. You've kept this place in great condition, he said. You ever think about expanding? Maybe doing short-term rentals? There's real money in that. I didn't buy it to make money, I said. He smiled, shrugged. Sure, but places like this are assets, family or not. Amelia said nothing. That night after they left, I called my sister Jean. He's watching the house, I told her. Not her, not me. The house. Jean brushed me off. You're reading too much into it. He's just trying to connect. I didn't argue. No one ever believes you when a man smiles the right way and says all the right things. But I knew. I'd worked 30 years in emergency rooms and end-of-life care. I'd seen too many men use charm as camouflage. Daniel had that same ability to look right at you, make you feel seen, and empty your pockets in the same breath. It wasn't just what he said. It was what he didn't ask. He never asked about Amelia's childhood, never asked what books she liked growing up, never once asked about Richard. But he knew exactly what year the house was built, what zip codes were trending, and how high the property value had climbed since the early 2000s. I kept all of that to myself. I knew how it would sound. Bitter, jealous, controlling, but I wasn't threatened by his attention. I was disturbed by his aim. And when I noticed Amelia had stopped coming alone, that's when I started counting how often she said his name before mine. It was a Tuesday morning in February, quiet and overcast, the kind of day that didn't ask anything of you. I had just poured my second cup of coffee and sat down with a crossword when I opened Facebook, mostly out of habit. I wasn't looking for anything. Not really. The post was already 4 hours old. A photo Amelia's hand fingers tilted just enough to catch the light on a diamond that didn't suit her. Captioned with, he asked. I said yes. Can't wait to start forever with you. 53 likes. Comments from college friends, co-workers, acquaintances I hadn't heard of in years. Not one asked where her mother was. They all assumed I already knew. I didn't. I stared at the screen for longer than I should have, trying to find a clue. Some indication. This was a joke, a placeholder, a soft launch before the real conversation. But it wasn't. She was engaged, and I had found out with strangers. I set the phone down, heart kicking too hard in my chest. My coffee had gone cold. My hands weren't steady. I called her. The line rang twice. She picked up, breathless. Mom. Oh my God, I was literally about to call you. Were you? It just happened last night. Daniel surprised me at that Italian place in Hillcrest. You know, the one with the candles on the patio. Then we went back to his place, and I guess we got caught up talking to his parents, and time just got away. She kept talking about the proposal, the ring, how his parents cried on the phone, how they'd already started thinking about venues. I said little, let her fill the silence. It felt like I was listening through glass. Eventually, I asked the question I knew I shouldn't. So when's the engagement party? Pause. This Saturday. That soon Daniel's family wanted to do something small. Just immediate family. His mom's hosting it at the club. Should I drive up Friday night? More silence. Then Mom. About that. I closed my eyes before she even said the next part. His mom's very traditional. She's planning everything. It's really for his side. Nothing formal. I see. You understand, right? It's just, she has a vision. Of course I said. If you're happy, I'm happy. She relaxed. That's what she wanted to hear. A clean answer. No edge. No questions. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen a long time. I pulled out an old photo album. Amelia in braces and costumes and swimsuits, with towels wrapped around her shoulders, all arms and legs, and joy. And then I flipped to the photo she would have posted if I'd mattered. Her on one knee, or maybe Daniel was. Her smiling down a ring freshly slipped on. A hug. A kiss. The crowd. The cheers. But that frame didn't exist for me. I hadn't been invited into it. I had been left at the edge of a story I used to help write. And what she didn't realize, what she wouldn't let herself see, is that Daniel's mother may have planned the party, but it was my absence that made it possible. I didn't tell anyone I wasn't invited. Not Jean, not Margaret, not even the neighbor who walks her dog past my porch every morning and always asks about Amelia like she's still 6 years old. I just nodded when people asked how things were going and said, "She's happy. That's what matters." It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. The truth was, I didn't know if she was happy. I only knew she was edited, smaller, softer, as if she'd gone through someone else's filter. The party was on a Saturday. The sky was clear and blue. A sharp breeze moved through the canyon. I stayed busy in the backyard trimming the lemon tree until my hands were sore. Around 3:00 p.m., I came inside, washed up, made a fresh pot of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table waiting for nothing in particular. That's when I pulled out the card I'd bought 2 weeks earlier. It was simple. No glitter. No script. Just, "Congratulations on your engagement" across the top, with a blank inside I'd meant to fill with memories. But now it felt like sending a letter to a locked room. I didn't write in it. Instead, I placed it back in the drawer and stood at the window staring out at the street. No one was coming. No one had thought to invite me at the last minute. I hadn't misheard. I hadn't misunderstood. It was just Daniel's side. I could hear Amelia's voice in my head, rehearsed like an apology made for someone else's benefit. His mom's planning it. It's really just for his side. I knew that tone. It wasn't hers. It was the voice of someone trying not to upset the balance. Someone coached into compliance. I used to hear it in the ER when patients explained away bruises they didn't remember getting. You can't always teach a woman how to spot manipulation, especially when it comes wrapped in adoration. I thought about calling her, not to argue, just to remind her who used to sit up with her when she had fevers, who worked nights so she could go to private school, who held her through the silence after Richard died. But I didn't, because the more I replayed her words, the clearer it became. She wasn't speaking for herself. She was echoing someone else's priorities. And if I confronted her now, she wouldn't hear me. Not with her voice buried under someone else's plan. Instead, I stood at the bookshelf and pulled down the photo of Amelia at 12 years old, standing on the beach in front of the La Jolla house. Barefoot hair tangled by the wind, smiling like she'd never need anyone's permission to be whole. She once said she'd get married right there in the sand. She said I could pick the music. Now she was married somewhere else, and I didn't even get to see the dress. Later that night, I placed the photo back on the shelf and made myself a simple dinner. After I ate, I walked into the living room, pulled the key to the beach house from its dish by the door, and held it in my palm. I knew what was coming next. It was only a matter of time before she'd call again, not for me, but for what was mine. The call came on a Tuesday evening, while I was reorganizing the linen closet. I had pulled out all the old blankets, some worn, some soft, from years of washing, and was folding them into tighter squares, when the phone rang. It was Amelia. Her voice started off sweet. A little too sweet. "Hi, Mom. Got a second?" "Of course," I said, even though I already knew something was coming. She hesitated, then launched into it. "I need to ask you something. And I need you to be cool about it, okay?" Nothing good ever follows that sentence. I leaned against the doorframe quilt still in my hands. "What is it?" "It's about the beach house." There it was. "What about it?" I kept my voice calm. She sighed like she was already worn out by the idea of defending whatever it was she was about to say. "Daniel says he doesn't feel totally comfortable there. Like it's not really ours, you know? Like he's being watched or judged when we're there." I stayed silent. "And I guess I've always kind of thought I'd inherit it one day anyway, so maybe it makes more sense just to sign it over now." She rushed the last part, like saying it faster, would somehow make it easier for me to accept. I didn't answer immediately. I was staring at an old Afghan her grandmother had crocheted, thinking about how many nights Amelia had curled up in it on the couch when she was little. That house held everything that came after Richard. Every new beginning, every hard end. It wasn't just a structure, it was a second chance. "Amelia," I said, finally, "that house is more than a vacation spot. It's the one place your father's memory still lives in something solid." "I know, Mom. I do," she said quickly. "But Daniel thinks it puts pressure on our relationship, like we can't fully relax there, knowing it's technically yours." Technically. I heard it then, the phrase, the framing, even the rhythm. These weren't her words. They were his, coached and polished. "And he wants us to have our own special places," she continued, without feeling indebted. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the phone still pressed to my ear. The audacity of it wasn't even what stung the most. It was the way she'd been convinced that my love came with a price tag. That offering a shared space was somehow a power move. "Sweetheart, I've never asked you for anything in return for that house. I never made it conditional." "I know," she said. Her voice was quieter now. "But still, maybe it's healthier this way. Healthier. As if our relationship was some kind of illness that needed to be treated with distance and erasure." I didn't argue. There was no point. I could feel it. This wasn't a conversation. It was a delivery. A script rehearsed and now read aloud. "Well," I said, steady and soft, "let me think on it." "Okay," she replied, relieved. "Thanks, Mom." She hung up. I sat there a long time, the quilt still in my lap. Then I walked to the safe and pulled out the deed. I held it under the lamplight, reading every word like it had just been signed yesterday. Delia Marie Whitmore. My name, no one else's. And I realized then it wasn't just about the house. It was about the story of our life together, and who had the right to hold the ending. The next morning, I made a call. Not to Amelia, but to someone who didn't need a second opinion to trust a mother's instinct. Jonah Grant never smiled. Not when we worked together at the hospital years ago, not even when we buried Richard. He was one of those men who lived with quiet edges, always watching, never asking twice. We weren't close friends. But I remembered how he handled the mess when another nurse's ex-husband tried to threaten her after hours. Jonah didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten back. He just showed up, stood in the doorway, and made himself understood. I found his number in an old spiral notebook tucked between tax documents. Jonah, SDPD, written in my handwriting next to it. I hadn't dialed it in over a decade. He picked up on the third ring. Grant. Jonah. It's Delia Whitmore. From Scripps. You probably don't remember, I remember. There was a pause. I need a favor, I said. Meet me at the docks tomorrow, 7 a.m. He hung up. The next morning, I drove to the edge of the marina past the sailboats and bait shacks to a little cafe that looked closed but never was. Jonah sat outside, black coffee in hand, a manila folder already beside him. You're early, I said. I live early, he replied. I slid a photo across the table. It was Daniel smiling beside Amelia at Christmas, the one she'd sent in a group text which I hadn't replied to. I want to know who he is, I said. Really? He didn't touch the photo. Just looked at it and then back at me. What are you expecting? I don't know, I said. But something in my gut tells me he's not who he says he is, and now he wants my house. Jonah finally took a sip of coffee, then nodded. Give me 3 days. True to his word, he called the evening of the third day. No voicemail, just a text. It's worse than you think. Meet tomorrow. Same place. When I arrived, he was already there, folder thicker than before. He pushed it toward me without ceremony. I opened it. What stared back at me were timelines, records, and clippings that tightened a knot in my chest. Daniel had been engaged twice before. Both women came from families with significant assets. Both relationships ended just shy of marriage. Both women withdrew claims but left paper trails, deeds, account transfers, financial authorizations that were revoked last minute. And then there was something else, a yellowed newspaper article. 1988. Headline: Local developer flees with $3.2 million in shopping center scheme. The name leapt off the page: William Morrison, Richard's former business partner, the man who vanished, the man who bankrupted us, Daniel's grandfather. I stared at the article, then at the photocopy of a birth certificate Jonah had included. Daniel's full name, Daniel William Morrison. I pressed my fingers against my forehead, trying to slow the spin of it. This wasn't just about my daughter's judgment anymore. This was a loop history folding back on itself, only this time I saw it coming. He's been using legacy accounts tied to Morrison's shell corporations, Jonah said. Same banking channels, same laundering patterns. You stop him now, or he finishes what the old man started. I didn't speak for a long time. Finally, I said, he picked her on purpose, didn't he? Jonah nodded. He knew exactly who she was. I closed the folder and stood. This wasn't just a man digging into our lives. This was someone trying to bury what was left of us. And now that I had proof, I knew exactly where to put it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the folder Jonah had given me, each page like a breath I didn't want to take. Names, dates, numbers, all pointing back to one conclusion. Daniel wasn't just a parasite. He was legacy rot. I stared at the old article about William Morrison until the ink blurred. Richard had never told me the full story. I only knew bits enough to understand we'd gone from secure to survival in the span of 6 months. He told me his business partner stole from him, ran to Florida, left him drowning in debt while we were still paying off Amelia's preschool. But he never told me the name. Maybe he thought shielding me would protect me. Maybe he was ashamed. And now, all these years later, The man's grandson had found my daughter, studied her, courted her, and tried to take the last thing Richard had left us, the house we built after everything collapsed. I traced Daniel's name with my finger. Daniel William Morrison. He didn't even bother hiding it. He wasn't just interested in my daughter. He was completing a job. He knew who she was, who I was, who Richard had been. I imagined him sitting across from Amelia at a restaurant listening to her talk about her childhood summers, the beach house, the mother who raised her alone. I imagined him smiling, nodding, knowing exactly what he'd found. And then I imagined him walking into our lives not as an accident, but as a strategy. I pulled out Richard's old file boxes from the hall closet, the ones I hadn't touched since he died. Tucked between a stack of tax receipts and a yellowed lease agreement, I found an envelope with legal stationery dated 1990. The name Morrison appeared again, scribbled in the margins, next to words like embezzlement, civil fraud assets, frozen. I closed my eyes and felt it settle in my bones. This wasn't coincidence. Daniel had grown up hearing the same names I had, but where I tried to protect my daughter from the past, he had turned it into a roadmap. He used love like a tool, smiled the way con men smile when they want to be let inside. He'd rehearsed his lines so well, Amelia couldn't even hear her own voice anymore. But I could. And now I had something he hadn't counted on proof. I gathered every document into a new folder. Then I walked to the linen closet, pulled out an old gift box from beneath the winter blankets, and placed the folder inside. Next, I sat at my desk, pulled out the nicest stationery I owned, and wrote one short note in my best handwriting. Every new husband should know his wife's family history. Congratulations on your marriage. Delia. I folded it carefully and tucked it on top of the records. It didn't look like much, just paper in a box, but I knew what it was. It was the story they tried to steal, restored chapter by chapter. And in 2 days, I would deliver it to their doorstep, wrapped in ribbons, smiling the way Daniel had taught me. I took my time assembling it. Each printout was placed deliberately: marriage records, financial reports, clippings about William Morrison's disappearance, and Jonah's full report on Daniel's current activity. I included notes in the margins, dates underlined in red, connections they thought were invisible, now made plain. I even printed photos from public records, screen captures of Daniel's aliases, names he used with other women: Emma Harrison, Sarah Blake. Both stories documented both women drained and discarded before anyone could stop it. I added a copy of Richard's estate file, highlighting Amelia's rightful inheritance money. Daniel had no claim to, but had started circling like a vulture anyway. Finally, I tucked in a single-page summary at the top. A timeline. A truth too neat to ignore. At the bottom, I signed my name: Delia Marie Whitmore, mother. Widow. Witness. I placed everything inside the leather folder I'd used once for legal work, back when I still believed in systems solving things. Then I slid the folder into a silver box I found in the back of my closet, the kind used for wedding gifts. I tied it with a white satin ribbon. No tag, no warning. Just a quiet answer to their original request. They wanted keys. They wanted access. They wanted my silence. Instead, I gave them history. By Friday morning, I was parked in front of their apartment in the Gaslamp Quarter. Tourists passed with coffee and strollers. I stepped out, box in hand, and walked the 5 steps to their door. I didn't ring at first. I just stood there. There were things I could have shouted, truths I could have demanded they acknowledge, but I didn't. The house in La Jolla taught me the strength of tides, how some things don't need force, just time. I rang the bell. Then I placed the box gently on the doormat and walked away. By the time I reached the end of the block, my phone was buzzing. Amelia's name. I didn't answer. By the time I reached my car, it buzzed again. Daniel. That one I picked up. His voice was shaking. Furious. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he spat. "You crazy old witch! How dare you send us this garbage?" I sipped from the to-go coffee in my hand and waited for him to breathe. "I take it you opened your wedding gift?" I asked. "This is harassment," he barked. "We're calling the police." "You should," I said calmly. "I'm sure they'd love to see what you've been doing with offshore accounts tied to your grandfather's fraud. You're bluffing." "I was a nurse, Daniel," I said. "We don't bluff. We document." He went quiet. In the background, I heard Amelia's voice rising. "Trevor, calm down. Let me talk to her." But he didn't hand over the phone. He just kept rambling, panicking, his voice unraveling by the second. That's when I knew he'd read enough. And it wasn't just fear of exposure. It was recognition. I leaned against the driver's side door and said, "Your grandfather left Richard ruined. You thought you'd finish the job." Another pause. Then quieter. "You have no idea what you've done." I smiled even though he couldn't see it. "No, Daniel. You don't." I hung up. Then I drove back toward the coast, letting the sun hit my face through the windshield. Because now it wasn't just about protecting a house. It was about showing my daughter the truth, no matter how late it arrived. He called 3 more times. Each time I let it ring out. On the 4th try, I picked up. "You crazy old bee," he started, but I didn't let him finish. "Careful," I said. "You're forgetting who's holding the paper trail." He was panting, rage bubbling beneath every syllable. "You think you can just waltz in here with your lies and ruin my life?" Nothing in that box was a lie, Daniel. It was all public record. Maybe you should have checked what else your grandfather's name still carries. He didn't respond right away. That told me everything. You dug into my family. That's stalking. That's illegal. "No," I said, voice calm. "That's called due diligence. I had a right to know who my daughter was marrying. You should be grateful I didn't send it to her boss or the local press." "You don't scare me." "Good," I said. "Then go ahead. Call the police. Tell them your mother-in-law gave you a wedding gift. Tell them what was in it. Better yet, hand them the contents yourself." He didn't say anything, just breathing now, ragged. In the background, I could hear Amelia again. Her voice was quieter this time, not frantic, confused, shaken. "What are you talking about?" I heard her say. "What's in the box?" But Daniel wasn't answering her. He was too busy spiraling. "You have no idea how much damage this could cause." I felt something settle in me then, something solid. "No, Daniel," I said. "You caused the damage. I just gave it a name." He hung up. The silence after was immediate and thick. I didn't move. I just sat there in the driveway, hands still on the steering wheel, letting the aftershock roll over me. It wasn't just what he said, it was what he didn't deny. He hadn't argued the documents. He hadn't claimed the reports were fake or the names wrong. He was scared. And fear doesn't come from being insulted. It comes from being seen. Later that night, I turned off my phone and made tea sitting on the porch in my oldest sweatshirt. The air off the ocean was cooler than usual, but I welcomed it. It kept me sharp. I didn't know what Amelia was thinking, whether she was believing him, whether she'd even opened the folder herself or just watched him unravel in front of her. But I knew something had cracked. Because men like Daniel don't scream unless they're exposed. And he wasn't just yelling into a phone. He was drowning in something he couldn't control. And I was done throwing him lifelines. The phone didn't ring again that night, but just before midnight, a single text came through. From Amelia. What is she talking about? Daniel, no punctuation, no emojis. Just a question typed too fast to be edited sent before she could talk herself out of it. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned the phone face down and let the silence sit between us. By morning, I had 6 missed calls, all from her. I didn't call back. Not yet. Sometimes when you're trying to show someone they're not alone, you have to let them sit in the quiet with their doubt. Let them feel the tension between what they've been told and what they've always known, but couldn't name. It wasn't until late afternoon that I heard the knock. 3 soft raps on the screen door like she didn't know if she had the right to be there anymore. I opened it slowly. She stood there, hair pulled back into a loose bun, eyes ringed with shadows. No makeup, no performance, just her. In her hands was the gift box. She looked at me, then down at it. "I read it," she said. I stepped aside. She came in without another word, set the box on the kitchen table, and sat in the chair she'd always claimed since she was a teenager. "I didn't want to believe it," she whispered. But he couldn't answer me. Not once. Not with anything real. I said nothing. She pulled a file from her purse. Emails printed out. Some screenshots. A few were of messages from Daniel to someone named Marcus Webb. My heart sank. I hadn't known she'd already started looking. "He left his laptop open," she said. "It's all there. He's been in contact with this Marcus guy since before we even met, asking about accounts tied to Morrison's name." She slid the pages toward me. "He knew about Dad. About you. About the beach house. This whole thing, it wasn't fate. It was research." Her voice cracked then, but she kept going. That same quiet determination I hadn't seen in her since she was a teenager surfaced beneath the tremble. I called one of the women from the file, Emma. She told me everything. The control, the isolation, the money he tried to access. She put me in touch with another Sarah. Same story. Same patterns. I waited. Then she said the thing I didn't expect to hear. "I believed him over you?" Her shoulders dropped as the words left her, like the guilt had weight. "I thought you were being dramatic, controlling, bitter." I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. "No," I said. "You thought you were building something real. That's not a crime." Tears welled in her eyes. "He said you were holding me back, that you couldn't let go. He was afraid of what I'd already seen," I told her, "and what I couldn't be manipulated out of." She let out a breath, shaky, but deep. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I'm going to destroy him, but I need your help." It was in that moment, not with an apology, but with resolve, that I finally saw my daughter again. Not the version he wanted her to be, the one I raised, the one who still knew how to fight when it mattered. She pulled it from her tote bag like it weighed 100 pounds. A plain manila folder bent slightly at the corners, thick with pages that hadn't been stapled or sorted yet. The messiness of it made it feel real. Amelia set it on the table between us and pushed it forward without saying a word. I didn't reach for it right away. I let her breathe. "He left his laptop open when he went for a run," she said finally, her voice tight. "I don't think he realized I had the passcode. He always said, 'Transparency builds trust.'" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I opened the folder. The first few pages were emails. Not just casual exchanges, but threads, months-long conversations between Daniel and someone named Marcus Webb, just like she said. The tone was clinical. Transactional, dates, account numbers, mentions of inheritance positioning, estate access strategy, and cohabitation leverage. He called me Leverage, Mom. I looked up. Her eyes didn't waver. There were screenshots from a finance app I didn't recognize. Investment accounts, offshore movements. One entry just a week after their wedding showed a transfer attempt to a numbered account in the Caymans. Rejected. He told me it was a new mortgage application, said it was normal. She shook her head slowly. "But then I found these." She handed over the next printout. A message exchange, this one between Daniel and someone labeled Emma H. It wasn't just financial. It was personal, familiar, the same affectionate tone he used with Amelia. "I love you. I'll handle it. You don't need to worry." Emma's replies were more cautious, colder. "He was still messaging her last month," Amelia said. "He told her he'd found a new angle." Her words, not mine. I kept flipping. A photo of Emma popped up, same man, Same smile, same fake warmth. And then Sarah. Another smile, another caption, another doomed attempt. Each image was another knife, one she'd already pulled out herself. Amelia folded her arms tightly over her chest, like she was trying to hold herself in place. I thought I'd found someone who actually loved me. But all he ever saw was a last name and a property line. I wanted to reach across the table and undo all of it. Rewind time to the night she brought him to dinner and tell her to run. But she had to see it. She had to survive it herself. Instead, I said, "You didn't fail." He did. She nodded slowly, but I could tell the shame was still clinging to her like wet clothes. I spent the last year defending him every time you tried to warn me. I ignored the things you saw because I didn't want to believe I was that naive. You weren't naive, I said. You were hopeful. And then more quietly, I was too. She finally looked at me, her face softer than I'd seen in months. What do we do now? I placed my hand over hers. We give the truth to someone who knows what to do with it. I pulled out Jonah's card from the drawer, slid it across the table, and for the first time since the wedding, Amelia reached for it without hesitation. Amelia didn't waste time. That same night, she made the calls. First to Emma, then to Sarah. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't circle around her fear. She went straight to the source because now she needed to hear the words from someone who'd lived it. She put them on speaker one by one as we sat at the kitchen table. Emma's voice was sharp-clipped. He love-bombed me in the beginning. Dinners, flowers, praise. Then slowly, it became about his career, his goals, his needs. I stopped calling my sister, stopped visiting my mom. He said they were draining my focus. I signed over power of attorney during a trip to Napa. Thought it was temporary. He nearly drained one of my trust accounts before I figured it out. Then Sarah, same pattern, different version. He told me my family didn't understand me, that they just saw me as a checkbook. He said he wanted to build a future without expectations. That sounded romantic until I realized I was paying for it. Amelia didn't say much during either call. She just listened, her arms wrapped tight around her torso, her face pale but steady. When the last call ended, she sat back in her chair and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. He used the same phrases with me, she said finally, word for word. I thought it was intimacy. Turns out it was a script. She stood up, walked to the window and leaned her forehead against the glass. The ocean was hidden in the distance, but I could see her reflection still taut, angry in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. She turned. Her voice was lower now. Cold. I want him gone. Do you mean I mean everything? I want him out of my house, out of my name, off any paper trail he's trying to ride? I want him exposed. She sat back down, pulled the folder closer and tapped her fingers over the top sheet. I'm calling the estate attorney tomorrow. If Dad's name was used in any part of this, if that money is legally mine, then Daniel's actions fall under theft. Maybe fraud. If I can get access to the files you have, plus these emails, we might have enough to open something formal. I nodded, but I watched her carefully. She wasn't just reacting. She was planning. I want him to see the door before I close it, she said. I want him to understand he never fooled me, not really. That he never won. There was a long silence. Then she added more quietly, but first I need him to say it, out loud. What I need him to admit why he married me, why he really came into my life. Her eyes met mine. And I saw something raw behind the anger, grief maybe, or the last flicker of disbelief that still hadn't burned out. Jonah said the FBI might be tracking him, she added. If that's true, they'll want a confession. Something on record. You're going to trap him. I'm going to let him talk, she said. The way he always does, too much, too confident. I'll just make sure someone's listening this time. I didn't speak. She didn't need my permission. She already had her answer. We met Agent Elena Ruiz on a gray morning that felt like the tide had stopped moving. The downtown field office was sterile, cool, a quiet hum beneath every surface. I sat beside Amelia in the waiting area, with the folder resting on her lap. She didn't fidget. She didn't speak. She just held it with both hands like it was the last thing connecting her to the ground. Agent Ruiz greeted us with a firm handshake and the kind of still eyes that had seen more betrayal than most people could name. She walked us into a plain interview room, no mirror, no theatrics, just a table, a pitcher of water, and a recording device already blinking red. "I appreciate you coming in," Ruiz said. "We've had a file open on Daniel Morrison for 3 years." Amelia's eyebrows lifted, but she didn't speak. Ruiz opened a manila folder of her own. Inside were images, documents, transaction logs, passport scans with different names, but the same eyes. All Daniel. Or rather, Daniel as he needed to appear to whoever he was targeting. His name has shown up in financial investigations spanning California, Arizona, and Florida. Ruiz continued. But until now, we didn't have anything cohesive enough to hold him. The women he's scammed have been hesitant. No one had the full scope. She nodded toward the folder in Amelia's lap. Until now. Amelia exhaled finally, setting the folder on the table. Ruiz flipped through it, nodding as she saw the same names they had been watching. Marcus Webb, multiple inheritance references. Shell corporations tied to Morrison family accounts. "You mentioned your husband's estate," Ruiz said, turning to me. "Richard Whitmore." "Yes," I answered. "He was swindled by William Morrison, Daniel's grandfather. Lost everything. It nearly ended us." Ruiz nodded again. "We have documentation of that case. It adds weight to the financial motive behind Daniel's targeting of your daughter." She looked back at Amelia. "He picked you because of your father, because of the assets connected to his name. This was never about you. It was about finishing what the last Morrison started." Amelia didn't flinch. "I want to help. I want him caught. I want him held accountable." Ruiz reached under the table and pulled out a small device, flat, no wires, simple. "If you're willing," she said, "we'll wire your apartment. We'll coach you through a few prompts. All you have to do is talk. Let him say what he's already said to others. Just let him believe you still believe him." Amelia nodded once. No fear in her face now? "I'll do it." Ruiz slid a form across the table, the type of paperwork that seals decisions you can't take back. Amelia signed her name without hesitation. When we walked out of that office, the air felt different. Still thick with what was coming, but also lighter. Like a door had opened, and only one of us knew where it led. As we reached the parking garage, Amelia turned to me. "He thinks I'm still his angle." I looked at her. She shook her head. "But he doesn't know I'm done being quiet." And when we drove away, the folder no longer sat between us. It was already in the hands of someone who could finish what we started. Friday came fast. By then, Amelia had practiced her lines. Agent Ruiz walked her through them again and again, like preparing a performance no one could know was a performance. But Amelia didn't flinch. She'd lived too many months pretending to be blind. Now she just had to pretend to still be asleep. They set the wire beneath her blouse, thin and flat, barely detectable. The apartment was prepped with hidden mics, one inside, a lamp another tucked behind the bookshelf. Ruiz stationed 2 agents in the van across the street. I watched all of it from a distance I didn't enjoy, but respected. Amelia texted him late in the afternoon. "Can we talk tonight? I want to make things right." He responded within minutes. "Of course. I love you. Be home by 9. She was. She lit candles, wore the perfume he liked, sat on the couch with old photo albums splayed across her lap, like the past was a lullaby she still wanted to believe in. When Daniel walked in, roses in one hand, the other already reaching for her shoulder, I could feel it from across the street. His performance beginning again, smiling just wide enough to be forgiven. "You look beautiful," he said. I missed you. She leaned into him like she used to. Let her head rest on his chest. Let him believe the storm had passed and the house was his again. Then she asked, "Tell me what to do next." He paused. A beat too long. Then the old rhythm returned. "All I need is access," he whispered. "Once the money moves, it's ours. The trust account tied to Richard's name, it's got enough to set us up for life." She nodded. Eyes, soft voice, smaller. "And you're sure my mom can't undo it?" He laughed. "Please." "She'll scream, she'll fight, but it's already moving. I made calls. That's what Marcus is for." That's when she said it. "So, you admit it. You married me for the inheritance silence." Then quietly, "Of course. And you should be grateful. You weren't doing anything with it anyway." He kissed her forehead. It was over in less than 5 minutes. The door burst open. FBI hands where we can see them. Daniel jumped back like the floor had opened beneath him. His perfect posture cracked. Hands raised confusion, twisting into something feral. "You set me up," he shouted, backing toward the bookshelf. Amelia stood. "I gave you the same gift you gave me," she said. A lie wrapped in something pretty. They cuffed him in front of her, rid him his rights while he spat curses into the room. But she didn't flinch. She didn't run. She watched him get dragged out of their home and didn't look away once. And when the door finally closed behind him, when the agents confirmed the wire had picked up every word, she sat down at the kitchen table and placed her hands flat on the wood. Not trembling, not broken, just steady. That night, she stayed with me in La Jolla. Neither of us talked much. We just sat by the window, coffee between us, watching the tide pull clean lines across the sand. Because sometimes justice doesn't shout, it settles. By Monday morning, San Diego knew his name. It was plastered across news tickers and phone screens, morning coffee reports, and browser tabs. I didn't have to go looking for it. Someone always brought it to me. Local man arrested in multi-state fraud scheme. Under the headline was his face, the same face that once charmed my daughter across a dinner table. The same face that grinned at me too wide, too rehearsed the first night he held my lasagna in one hand and a compliment in the other. But the photo they used now was different. No filter, no shine. Just hollow eyes and a jaw that had lost all its tension. His smile didn't survive the headline. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile either. I just stood at the kitchen sink, my coffee cooling in my hands, and stared out the window at the tide rolling in. The same tide that had carried my daughter's childhood. That had steadied me when Richard died. That had softened the silence in every chapter since. Amelia came downstairs an hour later, hair still wet from the shower towel draped around her neck, like she'd stepped into her own skin again. She had her phone in her hand. She didn't look up. "They're talking about him on the radio," she said. I nodded. "They didn't mention my name," she added. "They're keeping the victims anonymous." "You're not a victim," I said. "You're a witness. You survived it." She looked at me then. There was still grief behind her eyes, but it was clearer now. Not the kind that drowns you. The kind that finally lets you breathe again. He always said he'd take care of everything, she said. And I wanted so badly for that to be true. I was tired of being the one who had to be strong. I know. I ignored so many things. Because he made me feel seen. He saw what he could take, I said. Not what you needed. She pulled her coffee mug closer. Fingers tapping the rim. "Do you think he ever really loved me?" I took my time with that one. "I think he loved what you represented. But that's not the same thing." She didn't cry. She didn't even nod. She just breathed out slow and deep, like letting go of a name that never fit. "I want to go to the courthouse," she said after a while. "I want to hear him plead." "You don't have to." "I want to." I nodded. Later that day, I walked down to the sand alone. Just me and the breeze and the space that had once held every answer I needed. I thought about Richard, how he would have handled this, how his voice might have steadied Amelia when mine couldn't. I thought about the photo on my nightstand, the one of her at 12 barefoot cheeks, sunburned, laughing on this very beach. The same girl who now stood taller than the man who tried to bury her. And I thought about the city, how they'd only known Daniel's charm, his suit, his practiced smile. And now they knew the rest. They knew what we knew. And even if the tide pulled it all away again by tomorrow for now, truth had its moment. The courtroom was silent when she took the stand. Not the kind of silence that's empty, but the kind that listens. Amelia sat upright, shoulders, squared chin, steady. She wore a simple navy dress, no jewelry, no makeup, to cover what she'd lived through. She didn't look at Daniel as she passed him. She didn't need to. His eyes were already on the floor. The prosecutor began with soft questions. Her full name, her relationship to the defendant, how they met, when they married. Amelia answered each one with clarity, not cold, not distant, just clean, as though truth was a table she was finally strong enough to set herself. Then the questions sharpened. When did you begin to suspect that your husband had ulterior motives? She looked down for half a breath, then up. When he asked for the deed to the beach house and told me my mother made him feel like a guest. The jury watched her. No fidgeting, no notes, just her voice, her own. She went on to explain the inheritance, the emails, the aliases, the offshore accounts. She told them about the gift box, the folder, the files she found on his laptop. Every detail she gave was precise, like a map back to herself. She didn't cry. Even when she said he didn't just steal money. He tried to rewrite who I was, who I came from. Her voice never broke. 2 other women joined her that afternoon. Emma spoke first, clear, practiced, still carrying the edge of old wounds. She described her own version of the story, the charm, the isolation, the bank account. She barely saved from collapse. Then Sarah, quieter, slower, but no less powerful. Each of them painted the same portrait, different backdrops, same predator. The courtroom stayed still. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. When Amelia returned to her seat beside me, she didn't look like someone who had just testified against her husband. She looked like someone who had testified for herself. I reached over and touched her hand. She didn't squeeze mine back. She didn't need to. Her silence wasn't empty anymore. It was hers. The verdict came fast. 3 hours of deliberation. That's all it took. Daniel didn't turn around as it was read guilty on all counts. He didn't look at Amelia. Didn't look at me. Just stared straight ahead like if he didn't acknowledge what was happening, maybe it wouldn't be real. But it was. The judge spoke slowly, voice cutting through the wood-paneled stillness, like a blade. 12 years in federal prison, full restitution to the victim's forfeiture of all known assets and access to offshore accounts, frozen pending legal transfer to their rightful heirs. He didn't flinch until they said the number $4 million. The courtroom murmured. His attorney slumped slightly. But I watched Amelia. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just closed her eyes for a moment, let out a slow breath, and then opened them again. Clear, focused. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. That afternoon we walked down the courthouse steps, side by side. Reporters at a distance, agents still filing paperwork inside. Amelia held her purse close to her chest, fingers gripping the handle like it anchored her to the moment. "I'm not going to spend a cent of it," she said. "You don't have to decide today." She nodded. "It just feels strange. All those years thinking we had nothing left from Dad, and now, it's like something came back." "It did," I said. "But not just the money." She looked at me then. Not with the guarded distance she'd worn for so long. Not with guilt or apology. with recognition. "I don't know how to apologize," she whispered, "for how far I let him pull me." "You don't need to," I told her. "You came back." But I believed him. Belief isn't a crime, sweetheart. What matters is what you did with the truth. We walked the rest of the block in silence. The good kind. At home that evening, I made coffee, real coffee, not the half cups of habit I'd been surviving on for months. Amelia sat at the kitchen table and pulled out a photo album, the old one with sun-faded corners and torn plastic sleeves. She pointed to a picture, her at 12, hair, wild smile, toothy, barefoot, on the beach, holding a sand-covered stick like a sword. "I told you I'd get married there someday," she said. "You did," I answered, pouring the coffee. She smiled. Not the one Daniel coached into her. Not the one she used to hide behind. Her smile. But next time, she said softly, "It'll be someone who wants to build something, not take it." She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't need to. The words weren't for me. They were for herself. Later, she sat on the deck watching the ocean pull itself in and back again, like it was rewriting the shore from scratch. I brought her a second cup and didn't say anything. We were rebuilding something too, not from scratch, but from what was left standing after the storm. And this time, the foundation was solid. It was late afternoon, the light turning that quiet gold only the ocean can hold. Amelia and I sat on the porch overlooking the beach, 2 cups of coffee between us, and a soft breeze folding in through the screens. The tide was pulling out, leaving behind wide ribbons of smooth sand, untouched and clean. Like the beginning of something. She had her feet propped up on the railing toes, bare her heels still dusty from walking along the edge of the surf. She hadn't said much for the last hour, and I hadn't asked her to. Some things don't need narration. They just need time. "I used to hate this porch," she said suddenly, voice almost lost in the wind. I turned, slightly eyebrows raised. She smiled, not sheepishly, but honestly. "I don't mean that exactly. I mean back when I was trying to prove I didn't need anything from you. I thought sitting out here meant giving in, like I couldn't build something without coming back to the past." I nodded. I knew the feeling. But now, she trailed off and looked out toward the waves. "Now, I think maybe I just wasn't ready to understand what this place really held." She paused, her eyes glassy but unbroken. "It's not just where we came after Dad died. It's where I learned what home actually felt like. Not a structure, a presence. Yours." I didn't respond. Not right away. I let the words land where they needed to. She looked at me again. "Next time I marry," she said, "it won't be in a hotel or someone else's idea of perfection. It'll be here. Barefoot. No dress code. No secrets. And you'll walk me down the sand." My throat tightened, but I managed to smile. "I'll need flats," I said, and she laughed. The porch creaked as she shifted to face me fully. "You know, for a long time I thought forgiveness was something you had to earn back with huge gestures, money, grand apologies. But you just stayed. That's what mothers do," I said quietly. "Even when we've been shut out. Even when the door isn't ours to knock on anymore." We sat there for a while longer, just listening. The wind picked up. Somewhere down the beach, a child shrieked with joy over something the tide left behind. The scent of salt and old wood wrapped around us like an old sweater you didn't know you missed until it was back in your hands. Amelia leaned her head on my shoulder. "I don't think the waves ever stopped calling me back." "They didn't," I said. "They were just waiting for you to hear them again." She closed her eyes, and I closed mine. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anything to be fixed. I was sitting beside someone who had found her way home, not because she was lost, but because she remembered the way back. The porch, the sand, the ocean. They still knew her name. And now, so did she.